Hey, this is Rich Hart. I'm back with Keith Eigel. Keith, welcome back, huh?
Thank you, Rich. It's good to be back.
Keith, just before we broke before, we were saying it's not what you know, it's who you are. The best single predictor of leadership influence or the influence of leadership today. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. When you look at something like intelligence, when you look at something like personality, when you look at something like industry expertise, what we found is that there's like a necessary amount of it, but having extraordinary amounts of it doesn't really separate us in terms of our leadership.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we've all met people who are actually smarter than we are. A lot of those people who are smarter than we are only 22 years of age, right? But we don't want them leading our organizations. Because it's not about what they, we'll see, right? A few of them have been out there and we've seen the repercussions of that, right? Yeah. We've seen the repercussions of some really young leadership and decision-making that maybe wasn't grounded in the values and principles that are honed by the difficulties of life a lot of times.
Right.
But that's what builds the maturity. So it's not about what you know, although there has to be a commensurate amount of knowing stuff within any given industry in order for a person to even play in that game. But when we talk about leadership influence, which we define we define leadership as having influence with others in a direction on purpose.
Good.
And when we talk about having that kind of influence, and by the way, that when we define it like that, it becomes position independent, because everyone has wanted to have influence with their boss in a direction on purpose, influence with their friends in a direction on purpose, with their spouse, with their children, whomever. Right. But there are times that we also need to have influence with our direct reports, with the people who are looking to us for leadership in a direction on purpose. And when you think about it that way, the best single predictor, I said this during the introductory episode, but the best single predictor of a person's effectiveness is not what they know, as long as they know enough.
Yeah.
It's actually where they are on this developmental journey.
Right.
And really, I started talking about stages the first time we were together, levels 2, level 3, level 4. It's really easy to begin thinking about this in terms of outside in versus inside out.
Okay.
Outside in is a less mature perspective. It's where most of us are in our 20s, depending on our life's journey.
Still having fun,
still wanting to fit in, still all of these things that are so developmentally appropriate. And it's really possible to be effective like for your age.
Right.
Where we start seeing the ineffectiveness trickle in is when I should have been growing, but I've quit.
Okay.
My development's arrested a little bit. I'm feeling stuck. And I think one of the things that's really been interesting about the time that we have been in over the last 3 or 4 years, really since the pandemic started, is more and more people are feeling stuck.
Okay.
They feel like they
Is it its job? Is it personal? Is it just everything? Is
I
it
think
just a society?
It's just everything, because the things that shaped our understanding, like the lens that we saw the world through, which speaks more to our developmental maturity than it does to our knowledge, skills, and abilities.
Right.
We learned all that in a pre-pandemic environment. Mm-hmm. And then we're basically separated from people.
Sure.
Right? We're isolated. We're on Zoom calls. We're having to decide how much we're going to work, how much we can get away with not working, how much we need to control our work-life balance because we can't stop working.
And individuals themselves, we know, haven't even come out of that because maybe they've gotten so used to that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And that has actually created a deeper problem.
It's created a problem that just now the research is beginning. We're starting to see some results from the isolation.
Education, students, everything else down that line.
Yeah. And, it's as many areas as education has been behind the curve in so many ways, especially higher ed.
Sure.
They've actually been ahead of the curve in terms of reintegrating people into live environments.
Good.
Right? And so we're learning things from what they've done. Right. We're also learning about the resistance that both students and faculty have had to that.
Exactly.
But I still am working with organizations, with Fortune 100 organizations that still haven't even decided where their people are going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
Seeing that too as well.
And so people are lost. People feel stuck. They feel like they're, it's Groundhog Day-ish a little bit.
Pretty much so. Many of the individuals that I get to work with and develop that relationship, skills, knowledge, tools, tactics, resources. Mm-hmm. Okay. We've learned a lot over the last couple of years, but we've also been stagnated. All right, because that growth wasn't as quick as we wanted to see it. We kind of just stopped in time. Okay. And now as these changes now start to come up, we're seeing a lot of these business structures already and the individuals themselves that are doing well already now either looking to say, downsizing was a cool thing, but now am I getting that much productivity and profitability out of the people? And so where does the leadership go? Leadership is great. You got a leader, someone who is actually leading the team, leading the group, but everybody in their own right is a leader. And they've got to be able to lead their own path, okay, which is vertical or on a latitude, all righty? And how is that changed? How is that creating a bottleneck, all right, especially what we're seeing in the institutions and the college institutions and some of the things in the news itself that we're hearing today?
Yeah, I think during this last stretch of time, it's been so easy to feel done to, almost victimized by the circumstances that we've all been living through. What it's calling out of all of us, I think, to some degree, is who are we going to be in light of this new reality? Who are we going to be in light of the kind of priorities that have changed through this period of time in terms of work-life balance, in terms of how am I going to be as a family person, how am I going to be in terms of a leader, right? And it's actually the difficulty of struggling through that leads to a more inside-out understanding, doesn't allow us to be so victimized by the things going on around us, but kind of calls us to or challenges us in the direction of how are we going to be grounded. And so there are people who are better at that and people who are worse than that. It's almost like an athleticism, right? It's normally distributed where the majority of people have an average response to this difficulty. And so there's an average rate of growth. There's a handful of people, 15% of the population or so, that do it notably faster than others, 15% of the population that does it notably slower than others, or they're just stuck. And so the thing is there are better and worse ways to grow. There are better and worse ways to get grounded, to decide what we're about. And there are faster and slower ways to do that.
Exactly.
And if this is the best predictor of how effective we are in the environments where we want to have influence, then it behooves us to start leaning in a way where we start to figure out, what does it mean for me to keep growing up, to be on this developmental trajectory in an active way?
Yeah. What's happening to individuals through the growth of leadership and the ability to self-motivate? Not self-medicate, self-motivate.
Yeah, I think that's also a normally distributed characteristic. There are people who are very self-motivated. The thing is all of us have the capacity for greater motivation, but it takes structure. It takes accountability.
Yeah, sure.
It takes people actually grow faster and stay more accountable to their goals when they do it with others, which is part of the problem with the isolation.
Sure it is, yeah.
Where a Zoom call isn't enough.
No,
a Zoom call's really
interaction. We miss the personal or the direct interaction.
Yeah, we do. And we're missing something that cannot be recreated. I'm actually a fan of the efficiency of Zoom in a one-on-one kind of let's catch up sort of environment. We got some problems we got to push through. We got a task that we've got to get done. That's good. But when it comes to the less formal ways that lead to growth, it's found wanting. It's better than a phone call.
Sure it is.
It's way better than email.
Sure.
Right? But there's nothing like you and I sitting across from each other in this room.
Negotiation still happens at 65% of body language.
Yeah.
And interaction still happens at 65% already. And so utilizing, if you can see someone, now of course, now if you're on those profiles, those Zoom profiles and the Microsoft profiles and
you get a little piece of it.
Yeah,
right?
sure. Right. You can see people rolling their eyes and things of this nature, but it's not what it is between you and I. So now talking about what these things are most important.
Yeah. You can see people looking at the screen.
Yeah.
You don't know what they're looking at. You don't know what they're looking at on that screen. They could be checking emails and putting their email screen right in the center of their camera, where it's like they're focused on you.
Sure it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Many ways to put yourself and not be
there. back to your question.
Right. Motivation.
The way we motivate is we create structure and systems that allow for that to take place given what we've been given. I mean, the reality is 7 out of 10 of us are average, a little higher, a little low. There are some people that really are just kind of naturally super motivated.
Right.
But it's like, what are you listening to? What are you putting in front of yourself? Right? It's like, are you pushing yourself to learn? Are you creating accountability systems? How much are you just letting the day define you instead of you defining the day? And that's the difference. That's back to outside in versus inside out.
Sure. And there's a tremendous amount more distraction today. All right, and the amount of distraction itself, whether it's phone, whether it's emails, whether it's just social networking or anything else like this, there's a lot of distraction, all right, that's taking people into a different direction.
Yeah.
Already, and it's taking them out of that self-preservation and self-motivation, all right, opportunity out there because they're just not exercising, all right, the brain or the brain cell. Or
the cell,
one
brain
cell. I tell people all the time, I got one brain cell working at 30% capacity, but it's clocked at 30%, so it's all good. But I'm just saying that I think there's more application that can be put into today's leadership based through motivation or being inspired by others. I think inspiration is experience. Motivation is a mindset. All right, so how we're going to be able to pull those up.
I think
inspiration is based upon experience.
Yeah.
But motivation is based on a mindset.
Yeah, I like that.
But if you really take a look at inspiring through experiences, we have now the opportunity to change the mindset through motivation, or changing motivation, or developing a sense or new sense of motivation through mindset.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about mindset in leadership, because that is, all right. We used to talk about color code. And the color code is red and blue and green and yellow, however you want to take a look at it. And the crimson red. You take a look at the DISC profiles. You take a look at the Briggs-Myers profiles and everything else of this. And they were, or the color code themselves, that crimson red. They're red and they're leaders. And the blue, well, they're leaders with love. And so within that, when we start to take a look at this whole now change and develop of what's going on with today's advancement, we talked about themselves and the maturity, where that maturity starts to come in. And then now we start to bridge into the new facets of looking at technology, how technology, and how now the new leader. I think we're looking at a brand new leader here.
Yeah.
I can't talk about the leadership, all right, today, but I'm just talking about, businesses and companies and corporations. I'm seeing a lot of startups. I'm seeing a lot of different types of entities. People that would normally say, I wouldn't do that business, are now engaging. And we're seeing a lot more of technology really heading the forefront of a lot of these different types of businesses, where they're not looking at the brick and mortar anymore.
Yeah,
take a look at the big box, what's happening to big box. The only reason those big boxes are standing is because there's a want and need for an immediate, I needed to get it now. All right. But I'm thinking itself that as the change of leadership is now starting to hedge based upon what's happening in today's marketplace and how individuals are reacting to, let's just say, the news, the media, okay? Structure what they're hearing and how they're receiving their information, all right? The big box themselves, what we used to see is, let's just say the big networks are now starting to fade out, and you're starting to see more activity being drawn in by the internet.
Yeah.
And that's going to change. That's got to have an impact somewhere along the lines on this leadership.
Yeah, and I don't want to beat a single drum, although it's a good drum. But this is where outside in versus inside out, that discernment, wisdom, consistent with a value system,
right,
comes from the inside out.
Sure.
Right? You can have great mentors around you that can help that at earlier stages in your life.
Highly recommended.
Highly recommended. Yeah. Is that what you said?
Yeah, highly recommended.
Yeah.
Right? I had several mentors.
It's necessary, but a mentor, you and I are the same age. We're both, do you tell people how old you are?
No, definitely not. Why?
Yeah. So we're both the same age. I'll leave it at
exactly.
that.
That's good.
Developmental relationships play a different role at this stage in our life than they did when we were in our 20s and our 30s, right? The developmental relationship did more to shape us at those earlier stages.
Core value.
Now it's more to challenge us
it is.
more than shape us. Like, what are you going to make of this challenge? So here's the problem. We got a society that is largely outside in. We got a society that is looking for answers from outside themselves. They're not as grounded as they need to be in who they are.
Okay.
This is why I say it's not what you know, because you can know a lot of stuff from the outside in.
Right.
You can have learned knowledge, skills, and abilities
Right.
in a way. It is, are you able to discern what is wise out of that? And that's an entirely different question, because what's happened with the dissolution of the big box, right? As we get into a gazillion different sources of input, well, who's deciding are these good sources of input? I mean, this is conspiracy theory has risen in almost every segment of the world.
Sure it is.
We're seeing this in the political arenas. We're seeing it in business arenas.
Right,
it's
exactly.
like who's the truth teller out there? And we used to put a lot of trust in the big box, but the big box was also vetted in some different ways. A lot of what we have right now that are sources of input are vetted by no one.
That's right.
And if they get 1 million views, all of a sudden they're getting a lot of exposure.
And if it is, it's a private agenda. Okay. Which
too
is
often it's a private agenda.
Definitely so,
Yeah.
without a doubt. I think individuals right now, especially in the leadership, they're faced with challenges, choices, and the decisions. All right, 3 are probably the most important facets are that somebody's going to have to work with or develop a relationship to when it comes to leadership. We've got challenges themselves of working with yourself, people themselves, inside, outside challenges. Choices themselves, is it right from wrong? What is right from wrong? We're hearing so many different conflicting stories, all right? So the challenges, choices themselves, they fight, but it's the decisions. Am I going to make that right decision? Am I going to take a decision that I'm going to make? Is it going to be a 5-year road, or is it going to be a 10-year road, or is it going to be a 2-hour road? You know, and those are the things themselves. I think a lot of the leaders, especially the younger generations themselves coming in, we can't even go anywhere without talking about the generations and how individuals. We were raised on core values. We were raised on family value. All right,
maybe a different kind, yeah.
Yeah, maybe so. All right, but in that regards themselves, how the surrounding economy and everything else like this, everything that's going on right now is now shaping a different set of rules, regulations, policies, procedures, goals, and objectives, wants and needs, all right, that are reaching into this leadership pocket that's saying, challenges, choices, decisions, this is the right way to go.
Yeah. You know, to bring it back to the kind of overarching topic of our conversations, it's why leadership matters so much right now.
Exactly.
Right? Because there are a lot of people needing help. A lot of people working for organizations. And if there is not someone discerning these multiple sources of inputs into the culture, the values that we're trying to have our organization, our institution, our family live into, it's a roll of the dice.
Sure
it's
it is.
A crapshoot. Right. Yeah.
Definitely
it really is.
So, Keith, when we come back, we're going to be talking about the hard stuff.
I think that's
some of the things themselves that are definitely needed to be discussed, all right, because it doesn't get easier from here, all right? There are some things themselves that we're really going to have a bank of resources, all right, some skills, and definitely some tactics that we're going to have to work on in really discerning right from wrong, true from false, positive from negative. And so when we come back, we're going to be talking about the hard stuff.
Looking forward to it.
Let's do it. Thanks.
Thanks.